Hello, I'm Peter Schuster, and today I want to talk with you about creative ideation. Focus of today's lecture is on those techniques that can enhance your ability to be creative, to come up with more innovative solutions for your designs. There are lots of great techniques out there. This is just a snapshot of maybe a dozen of different things that you can try to help your creativity. Before we get started, there is some preparation you're going to need to do. This is a bit of a marathon session because there's a lot of cool techniques here that we're going to be trying out. I want you to gather some materials. You'll need 5 to 10 blank sheets of paper, ideally completely blank, no lines on them. If you don't have any of those handy, then the lined paper will work. It just tends to get in the way a little bit of sketching, which is a great technique for ideation. You'll have to have a writing instrument. Pencil or pen will be fine. Some people prefer to do markers. Obviously, don't want to bleed through there. So figure out what you're comfortable with. And then some kind of timer, because I'm going to be sending you off to do little activities in specific time frames. So watch a phone, something like that. If you have a phone, please remember not to pay attention to that while you're working on the exercises or the videos. Try to remain focused on this. You can certainly pause the video and come back later if you're finding that it's running long for you or you just can't maintain focus. That's fine. One of the beauties of an online video is you can do that. Then you want to find a comfortable place. You're going to be here, I say an hour or two. That's really much more than this will take. I'm hoping that the video will be about a half hour, and then your activities might extend it up to an hour. You also need to have a surface to write on. So if your comfortable place is on a couch, make sure you've got a writing surface for yourself there as well. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. So these are the techniques we're going to be talking about today. We'll start out talking about ways that you can prepare for ideation, things that you need to do ahead of time to really make the ideation session, the time when you're being creative, as productive as possible. Next, we'll move on to creating solutions. There are 4 techniques that I'll walk through that are really great at getting you started coming up with ideas. But nearly every ideation session has some challenges to it. You're going to run out of ideas at some point in time. That is usually not the time to stop ideating. That is the time to work on getting unstuck. And so I'm going to give you another 5 techniques or 4 techniques and then some suggestions to move further outward to get unstuck in those situations. So first off, preparing for ideation. Number 1, you really need to know what the problem is that you are going to try to develop solutions for. We haven't talked about that in the class yet. That'll be a topic for next week. So I'm going to defer that discussion. But please remember, it is key before you really want to focus on getting ideas. It's key to fully understand the problem you're trying to solve. The first actual technique beyond that I want to talk about is called analogies. So analogies is the process of relating your problem to another situation, where the solutions already exist. You want to frame, there are a couple benefits from this. One is that those existing situations have existing solutions to get you started. And if it's a different industry or a different area, often those solutions will be innovative in your area because you're pulling them from somewhere else. In addition, knowing that solutions are out there for similar problems helps you to not feel overwhelmed. And feeling overwhelmed is one of the mental barriers that we get. The problem just feels intractable. Here are a few examples to show how this has worked in the past. Fuel cell plates have been developed as analogies to leaves on a plant. Now, there's the obvious chemical transmission there, but there's even more than that. The flow of material through them, veins, and so on, are direct analogies. Another example is the burr seeds that you get stuck on your socks when you're out hiking. That was actually an analogy to Velcro, or used to develop Velcro. Bohr's atom model was created as an analogy to the solar system. A couple other interesting ones: when Intel developed the Celeron processor, which is a lower end processor for them, they did that in response or in realization that U.S. Steel used to be a major steel manufacturer, still is, but not as large as they used to be. And Intel felt that they lost some of their market share because they gave up the low end of their market. concrete reinforcing bars. They allowed other people to move into that area. Intel didn't want to do that, so they introduced a low-end processor like the Celeron. Finally, there are a lot of recent store developments, Staples as an example, that have used models of other types of stores, supermarkets as an analogy. Believe it or not, office stores didn't used to look like Staples. They were different from the supermarket model. So anyway, these are some examples of analogies being used. Spending some time after you fully understand your problem to see how it might relate to problems in other areas, other industries, can be a helpful technique to get you started in ideation. Quick example analogy. Throughout this video, I'm going to be using this idea of a robotic basketball player. Just kind of a fun little thing to think about, a thought experiment, if you will. Your robotic basketball player, if we were designing one, would need to be able to pass the ball to another player. So we're going to focus on that particular function. How many ways can we think of to enable our robotic basketball player to pass a ball? There are some analogies there. Passing a ball is moving something from one place to another. So what things move? What systems are out there that enable movement? Well, in a plant, we've got conveyors, projectiles, throwing things. We could look at rockets, or we could look at throwing. I didn't even mention that. There's obvious sports analogies for basketball. But here are some interesting ones. Radio communication, using electromagnetic waves. Maybe there's something we can learn to that. Is there any sort of wave activity that we could use? What about package delivery? That's taking things from one place to another. So look far afield, and then maybe that'll prompt some cool, innovative idea for you. Okay, so moving on. The next technique I want to talk about is called the How Might We, or HMW. How might we's are short questions that we use to launch our ideation. Basically, it's a way to frame our problem very specifically for a short period of time. You've already understood the full problem. How might we takes that problem and rephrases it slightly. So you want to make these how might we statements or questions broad enough to get lots of ideas, but narrow enough so you can get specific, and you can generate lots of these throughout your ideation. So it focuses you on specific goals. They are temporary focuses. And here's a few examples. Let's say the problem that we have is that burning gasoline provides pollutants into the atmosphere. So some questions you might ask to focus your ideation are, how might we capture gasoline pollutants? So this is focusing on one activity. You're agreeing up front that you're going to produce those pollutants. Now you just want to capture them. A second one that you might ask is, how might we store and use energy for transportation? That's basically what gasoline is for a car. It's stored energy. What other ways might you store energy? Or a third one is, how might we eliminate the pollutants from gasoline? Is there any way to pull them out before we even use it, before we extract the energy from it? So these are just different ways of phrasing a problem that might give you new ideas. Take a quick exercise here. So I want you to take 3 minutes. You're going to think about this robotic basketball player that you are hypothetically designing, and specifically about their passing. Write 3 different how might we questions for this problem. So pause the video in just a moment. Write each question at the top of its own page. You're going to use those pages for something else. And then restart the video when you've got those 3 different how might we questions. Okay, if you're ready, we'll move on now. Last thing I want to talk about in preparing for ideation is stoking. Stoking is about changing your thought process, your approach to a problem, by making a radical change. You're doing something distinctly different to break you out of a mold. Most of us engineers spend most of our time doing analysis problems. That's a certain mindset. And if you're in that mindset when you're trying to come up with ideas, you will be criticizing those ideas all the time. You don't want to do that. You just want to generate ideas when you're doing ideation. So how do you break out of it? You do some sort of Stoke activity. Here are a few examples. I'm going to go over the next couple of slides and just give you some examples. If any of these look interesting, you can come back to this point in the video and freeze it on that slide to get more information. Whatever you do, this is supposed to be a quick, fun activity to break you out of your normal mode of thinking. Just keep that in mind when you do it. So one option is you do some sort of brain teaser. Here's an example. A ball is stuck in a pipe that's in the concrete floor. You've got a certain limited amount of materials. How can you get the ball out? What are the things that you can do? So this is kind of an ideation activity, but it's a totally low stakes sort of fun one, and it gets you thinking in the right way. Another option you can do is to do a quick design build activity. Paper airplanes are a great example, but you usually want to you can just make paper airplanes. That can be fun. It can distract you from other stuff. You can also add little twists to it. When I have teams, I usually tell them, okay, each person can use only one hand. And that kind of encourages a different way of thinking. Your non-dominant hand and somebody else's non-dominant hand, can you still fold a paper airplane? Another option is to do something that's concurrently physical and mental. Not a lot of strain in either case, but a little integration. With a group of people, you can do like story ball, where you have a ball and you get in a circle and you toss the ball to each other. When you receive a ball, you have to add a word to the story, then toss the ball to someone else. And the intent is that it's very fast and you get this sort of organic story growth at the same time as you have to pay attention to catching a ball and throwing a ball. And usually this ends up in the group laughing, and that's kind of the goal. And you get some fun stories about it. There tend to be a lot of vampires that show up in these for some reason, probably because of the dark and stormy night start. You can start it any way you want. This is something you can do individually. Just bounce the ball against the wall. Just make sure your roommate's not on the other side and getting pissed at you. And then just add a word each time that you catch the ball. So another activity, a little less physical, but a visual thinking one. Take a few minutes and just draw squiggles on a blank piece of paper. And then add feet, beaks, eyes, and whatever else you need to turn each one of your squiggles into a bird. This gets at thinking creatively. Now you need to, in order to make this work, you need to make those squiggles random. You try to make them like birds, you've kind of defeated the purpose. And then the last one is just on the physical creativity. Find an open private space, play some music, and dance. Get out there and just let loose. I say close your eyes because, quite frankly, I don't even want to see myself when I dance. But if you're not embarrassed by that, even to see your own dancing, then leave your eyes open. Whatever you do, don't run into things. Just let yourself go for a little bit and enjoy that. And that can break your mindset. So those are some Stoke activities. Let's dive right into once you're ready, what are the techniques you can use to help get you more ideas, creating solutions? So first off, I want to talk about why we bother to do this. Sometimes you just come up with ideas on your own, and actually a brain dump that we'll talk about in a little bit is basically that. Let's just write down everything we've already thought of. But beyond a few ideas, some of us can get 5, some people can get 10 right off the bat. Most of us sort of peter out after a little while. But there are a lot of techniques that can take that to the next level. Like if you're going to have an ideation session, at a minimum, you should get 100 ideas out of that in like 20 minutes. That should really be your goal. And I'm not kidding here. There are people who do ideation sessions when I teach this class, and they'll come back with 5 ideas in 20 minutes, and I'm dumbfounded. That's absolutely not ideation. Ideation is hundreds of ideas in a short period of time. So that's always your goal with this. So I did a little study a few years ago with my 234 class, and I gave, right on the first day of class, I had these sheets prepared where I gave each small group a different set of instructions. And I told them all to improve a bicycle transmission, somehow make it better. And it was kind of a vague question. I would love to try this again, and I probably will at some point with a more specific guideline. But it was make it better. So they could figure out how they wanted to make it better. One team, that's all that I gave them, and then I gave them 20 minutes. They got less than 10 ideas. Next group, I gave them some instructions for a technique called Scamper. We're not going to talk about Scamper this time in the course. It's a little bit complicated. Even though it's a little complicated, that group still got twice as many, even with minimal instruction. Then I gave a group I told them to simply brainstorm. I didn't tell them how to brainstorm. I just gave them a few basic rules of brainstorming and said, do it. They got a little bit more than Scamper. Then I gave a group the brainstorming instructions, and I gave them each Post-its and told them to write, each person could write ideas on Post-its, so they each had access to expressing their ideas right away. The basic brainstorming team, by the way, just found a blackboard somewhere, and one person was a scribe. And then the last group, I gave brain writing instructions, and I was astonished at the number of ideas that they got out of that session with no other training. I had never done brain writing before, and this totally convinced me it's a really awesome tool. So I'm going to talk about the brainstorming, brain writing. Again, we're not going to do Scamper, but I'll introduce a few other ones. This is why we do it. And you might ask, okay, so yeah, you get more ideas. Who cares? We want good ideas, right? Well, let's make an assumption here. The best ideas are going to come randomly in time. Now, that's not entirely true. You're probably going to get a few good ideas right at the beginning, but I guarantee those aren't the only good ones. The other ones will come later during your session. Let's assume that only 5% of the ideas you come out with will be ones that you could move forward with. And this is deliberate. When you do ideation, you are deliberately focusing on getting lots of ideas and deliberately introducing crazy ones that could never go anywhere. So it's reasonable to assume that 5% is a number of how many good ones you might have. That means if you only generate 10 ideas, none of them might be good. If you have 100, you might get 5 good ones out of that. 500 ideas might give you 25. That's why we want a lot of ideas, to find the really best ones. And again, there is no best with design. There is no optimal design. But the more good ones you have, the closer to an optimal solution you can work. Okay, so let's talk about brainstorming. You've all probably done this before, probably in a session sort of like that picture looks like there. There are some rules. Most people are somewhat familiar with these rules, but these are really, really key, and I want to hit them hard here. Number one, defer judgment. This means you do not evaluate any idea at all during the brainstorming session. You don't say, hey, great idea. You don't say, oh, come on, really? Or no, we can't do that. All of that is judgment. You just say, thank you for submitting it. Thank you for proposing that idea. You say, yes, I like that. And here's another idea. Well, actually, you don't even really say that I like it. You just say, yes, and here's another one. So number one, no judgment at all during the session. It's a limited time. You can do it. You cannot be judgmental for a short period of time. I trust you. Number two, your goal is volume of ideas. Literally hundreds of ideas at the end of a session is your goal. Not how good they are, just that there are a lot. Put numbers on them, count them up. Be serious about the counting. Your goal with brainstorming, the storm concept, is that when you hear an idea, it sparks a new idea in someone else. So build on those ideas you hear. When someone says something, you think, what can I do with that? And crazy ideas are better, because if you're building on ideas, the crazy ones tend to spark more creativity. So those are the 4 basic rules. No judgment, many ideas, build on ideas, and be as crazy as possible. This is all about being fast as well. You're not trying to explain the idea. You want to capture it in some form. Post-its are awesome. So are whiteboards where everyone has their own marker. And write down just enough information so that you'll remember it at the end of the session 20 minutes later. Quick sketch, couple of words, whatever is necessary. Don't try to explain it. Just get the idea out there. And this should be a fun activity. This is like a party game, basically. Okay, let's talk about the deferred judgment. Say yes and, but not yes but. So the yes and is acknowledging someone else's idea and adding your own twist to it. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do with brainstorming. Yes, but is evaluation. So avoid that word but at all costs. Avoid other words like, oh no, sigh. Even nonverbal cues are bad. Rolling your eyes. Laughing can be okay as long as it's more a generic laughing. You're not laughing at someone or at an idea, unless it was intended to be funny. So watch out for these key phrases. And of course, there are a lot other ones. You don't want to discourage anyone else from proposing an idea, because the next idea they say could be the perfect one or could trigger the perfect one. So it's really about setting the stage so everyone feels totally comfortable to throw out any idea they think of. Okay, there are a few setup suggestions I have. Number one, if you're doing this in a group, and brainstorming is best done in a group, it's hard to get a storm if you're the only one there. Designate a facilitator, someone who keeps focus and will interrupt if there's any evaluation going on. There should be an ability for everyone to record their own ideas, and every idea should be visible to everyone else. So Post-it note pack and a big wall that you're putting them on, or a whiteboard where everyone can step back and see all of the ideas on there. These, I think, are really important. You're going to spark ideas by seeing others' ideas, so you need to see them. And if someone is screening, if one person is writing the ideas down, it will definitely dampen the number of ideas you get. So I think these are really important things. They're not formal rules, but they are very, very helpful. And then keep this short. 20 to 30 minutes is all you want to put in. Yes, it's fun, but it's also tiring. And you will hit some lulls in there, and you might want to take a break on those. Plan multiple sessions. All right, so let's talk about a variation of that, brain writing or brain sketching. Again, I learned about this a few years ago, and I have seen tremendous results from it. So I'm a big fan of this now. Brain writing or brain sketching is like brainstorming, but it's done on paper, and it's done sequentially rather than all at once. It's a silent activity. That's kind of weird, and I'll talk about why in a moment. Here's the basic steps. Everyone starts with a sheet of paper, and you take 3 to 5 minutes to write as many ideas as you can on that piece of paper about the topic that you're all working on. Everybody's working on exactly the same topic. You can write down words, you can write down sketches. Just like brainstorming, you don't want to critique your own ideas. You want as many ideas as you can. So after the 3 to 5 minute period, you're going to hand your page to the person to your right and receive one from the person on your left. You're going to read through the ideas that that prior person wrote. And for 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to record any new ideas you can think of. You don't repeat the ones that you just read or the ones you just wrote. We're not trying to get any duplicate here, but we're trying to see if you can trigger new ideas. That's, again, the storm aspect of it. And then you repeat until the paper makes it all the way around, or until a little bit of here. Testing. Okay, looks like we're back. Okay. I'm just going to assume that you can all still hear me. So moving on. Oh, man. Jumping back and forth. Okay. So that's brainwriting. So why silent? Why do we do this silently? Well, it's eliminating the risk of criticism. Again, you don't want to criticize at all in brainstorming, but sometimes it can happen. Or one person tends to dominate the production of ideas. Doing this silently separates that, and it can enable groups to get a lot more ideas. Okay, so let's try, I'm gonna have you try some ideation techniques in a moment, but you need to get yourself in the right mindset. So I want you to pause the video and do some Stoke activity. If you want, rewind it a little bit, take a look at the options if you don't remember those, or just get up and do a little bit of dancing, or draw some of the squiggle birds, something like that. And then when you feel ready to get into ideation, restart the video. So go ahead and pause it now, and I'll be here for you when you get back. Okay, so let's talk about brain dumping. Brain dumping is an individual activity, and it's nice to mix this in if you have a team to do some of this and some of brain writing and some of brainstorming, kind of mix it all up. I usually like to have brain dumping for individuals and then go to brainstorming. It kind of clears the slate, gets everyone's ideas out at first. You share those ideas at the beginning of brainstorming to sort of prime the pump. The environment, I want to say a few things about this throughout the course. The environment in which you work affects your creativity. Find a comfortable place, and a place that has some inspirational material around you, great pictures or cool designs, something that is makes you feel more creative. That's what you're looking for. And that can be hard, especially if you're confined to a certain area or something like that, or you don't have a lot of creative things. But it's something to work towards. You I think, will be impressed over time as you generate this sort of creative space for yourself, how much it can impact your ability to be creative. So remind yourself at the beginning of this what your challenge is. And I recommend using the how might we questions. You're going to start with a blank page, and you're going to write down or sketch every idea you can think of. And just like with brainstorming, this can be tiring. So give yourself a time limit. Because you're by yourself, 5 or 10 minutes is probably sufficient for a single session. And you can come back to it later. So I'd like you to do this as an exercise. We'll do a 5-minute brain dump. I want you to come up with ideas for a robotic basketball player's passing ability. Start with one of the sheets that you have with the how might we question at the top, and that's the question you're going to focus on. So you're going to pause the video, write down as many ideas as you can. I recommend in 5 minutes, try to get at least 20 different ideas, and then restart the video when you're ready. So go ahead and pause now, and I'll be here when you get back. Okay, let's talk about brain walking, next technique. Brain walking is, unlike the other techniques, it's very active. Now, brainstorming can be quite active as well. You're usually standing up and moving around, but this again can be an individual activity that you do, and it can be quite active. In fact, it will be on this ideation. The goal is that you get up and move around to generate ideas. The simple act of moving can give you more ideas. It's amazing. So even just moving around makes a difference. But if you can also act out your design challenge, so in this case, pretending to be a basketball player, air basketball or crumpled up paper basketball or whatever, that can make a difference for you. If you're doing something with cooking, actually doing some cooking and thinking while you're cooking. So go through the motions, experience the user's problem. That can be very helpful. Put yourself in their situation, visualize how you might want to get out of it. Those are your ideas. Look at objects or surroundings, not surrounds, surroundings for inspiration. Move from one space to another. See what you discover. Change your scenery, and that can actually truly change your ideas. So this can be very successful, again, for many reasons. One, just movement can really enhance your ideation. But in addition, adding the problem, experiencing the problem, seeing new things, those as well can help. So try this out, see what it works for you. Let's do a quick exercise. This one takes a little bit longer because you're going to be up and moving. 10 minutes, I recommend. You're going to play either air basketball or crumpled paper basketball, or if you've got a real basketball, you can go out and shoot a few hoops. Go ahead and do that. Use another one of your how might we questions to record your new ideas. So if you're going to be playing real basketball, shoot a few shots, but remember your goal is to get ideas. Keep a clipboard or something with your piece of paper there and write them down as you think of them. Try to get 25 ideas during this 10-minute period. And then when you're ready, restart the video. So go ahead and pause now. All right, so what happens if you've tried these techniques and you got, I don't know, 50, maybe 100 ideas, but you're feeling like you're not going anywhere? Well, that's when you want to apply some of these getting unstuck processes. You can even apply these at the beginning. I don't mean to imply that these have to be worked in later, but they do work very well if you get stuck in brainstorming. One of my favorites is worst possible idea. We often feel pressured to get good ideas, even though we know the goal is just to get ideas and that we're not evaluating. There's no such thing as good at this point. We know all those things. We still feel like we only want the good ones. But to deliberately give yourself some freedom, look for the worst ones you can think of. And if you're in a group, can someone think of one that's even worse than that? Keep going with that. It turns out that sometimes the things we think of that are worst ideas actually aren't. They're actually really great ideas. They're just totally different. And so we don't think of how they can be used. Another thing is those worst ideas tend to be what we also call crazy ideas, and they can be the ones that prompt new ideas during the brainstorming session. I'd like you to try this out. So again, go to your third how might we question, that piece of paper, and pause the video. Think of as many bad ideas as you can. What is the worst possible idea? What's the next worst? And so on. Try to get at least 15 different ideas. Now, when I'm saying ideas, I mean the worst ideas you can think of. I'm not asking you to use worst possible ideas to get 15 good ones. No, every idea you write down is an idea. In 3 minutes, I think you can probably think of 15 really bad ideas. I trust that you can do that. So pause the video, do this activity, restart when you're ready, and I'll be here. All right, let's talk about incubation. Incubation is a real quick one to talk about. Incubating something is just letting it stew for a while. You've got, you know, when you're in a situation and someone says something and you can't quite think of what to say, you walk away and immediately you think of it. That's incubation at work. That is our subconscious working on things. And subconscious is awesome at coming up with innovative solutions. So let things lie for a little while. This is another great reason why you do multiple ideation sessions. You sleep on it and see what happens. This is actually a really important technique. So we're not going to practice that here because I don't want you to go to sleep in the middle of the video. But that's basically the idea of incubation. Let's talk about imposing constraints. We have rules that we assume. When we define a problem, there are certain things that an ideal solution has to do. In the case of our robotic player passing, they need to be able to transport the ball or send the ball from themselves to someone else. That's what passing is. So that's a constraint on the system. Maybe we have some constraints like power usage and so on. An open-ended problem that doesn't have any of those constraints can actually be really difficult to solve. So sometimes adding an artificial constraint can give you more ideas. It's counterintuitive, but it actually can work. So here's a couple of quick examples. Design a ladder that's not going to fall down. It's not able to fall down. So that's kind of a challenging problem. It's pretty open-ended. Let's constrain it a little bit just to see what happens. You can only use parts from an old clothes washing machine. So you have to think about what's in a washing machine. Well, you know, you've got motor and belts and pulleys and big drum. You know, what do those trigger anything for you? This is like, it's adding prompts, basically. Another challenge, a better method to clean dishes. We've got dishwashers, we've got individuals washing dishes, but let's impose a new constraint. You can't use water. What can you do without water? Now, that feels like you're eliminating the vast majority of potential solutions, but again, usually you use imposed constraints after you've explored all of the solutions you could immediately think of. So now we dive deep into one area and we can find some cool solutions in that area. So that's the idea of imposing constraints. I'll do a quick example here rather than having you do this one. What if your robot has Velcro hands? Does that do anything for you? What if we couldn't use batteries? So there's not an electrical power for our robot. What if the robot was actually smaller than the ball? Does that do anything for us? What if you could only use spinning wheels? What kind of solutions could you do with spinning wheels? So that's the idea of imposing constraints. Last one I'm going to talk about here is challenging assumptions. Challenging assumptions is sort of the opposite of imposing constraints. When you start on the design and you come up with your definition of the problem, you work hard to understand that and you try to drop false assumptions. However, sometimes the assumptions that you're left with, they aren't as firm as you originally thought. So maybe the things you thought were necessary aren't really necessary. Or maybe dropping one of the things that is necessary will actually give you some cool new ideas and you can work around that constraint later on. So there are two benefits here. One, challenging assumptions might allow you to get a better problem definition, get rid of assumptions that aren't really valid. And secondly, remember, we're just getting ideas here. So dropping a constraint for a little while to get new ideas is a great thing to do. So you want to focus on what are your assumptions, and then you want to drop some of those. So let's do this as our last exercise here. On a new sheet of paper, I want you to write down 5 assumptions that you have about a robotic basketball player passing a ball. What are the assumptions that you feel were important, that you're kind of just mentally been working under? There should be at least 5 of those that you can come up with. And then I want you to cross out 2 of them. If those things were gone, what new ideas do you get? So pause the video, write down the 5 assumptions, cross out 2 of them, and then spend about 5 minutes. See if getting rid of those assumptions can enable you to get maybe 15 new ideas. When you're ready, come back and restart the video. Okay, just to wrap it up, I want to talk about other techniques. The ones that we've looked at are tools. And it's not really about how many tools that you have or that you know how to use. It's about having the right tool at the right time. And we don't know what that right tool is for any given problem. Certain problems, certain teams respond better to certain types of tools. That's why it's good to have a number of different methods that you can play around with. There are a ton of other tools out there. There are books written with hundreds of different ideation techniques. Most of them rely on the basic brainstorming rules. So I really want you to try to get this lodged in your brain. No judgment when you're ideating. focus is on volume or quantity of ideas. Build on any idea that comes out there. So try to build on ideas and encourage wacky and crazy ideas. We're not trying to evaluate them. We're trying to get lots, and the wacky ones help a lot there. So again, this is just a quick overview of a few options. I'd like you to try these. We'll do a little bit during class, and then we'll have you use them when you get to the project at the end of the class. Keep track of these, and if you're interested, just do some brainstorming for do some online searching for ideation techniques. You'll find a lot. And remember, don't forget to scan and upload the papers with all the ideas that you generated during this video and put that onto the course website. Thank you, and I will see you next time.